Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this presentation from the Theosophical Society in America. My name is Ajahn Cianciosi. I'm the Director of Public Programs, and I'm happy to be with you this evening. The Theosophical Society promotes study, meditation, and service. We encourage open-minded inquiry into the world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts. And we have a deep respect for the unity of all life. Our goal is to help people explore the spiritual path so as to arrive at a deeper understanding regarding the wisdom of the ages. Furthermore, we feel that this wisdom is not limited to any one tradition, and thus we offer programs from all traditions. I invite you to visit our website, scroll down under programs, and there you'll find a full listing of the online and in-person programs that we are currently offering. I'm sure that you will find many that will be of interest to you. Now, for this evening's presentation, we have an interview I did with Ajahn Sona, who is a Theravada Buddhist monk and the Abbot of Birken Forest Buddhist Monastery in British Columbia, Canada. I started the interview by asking Ajahn Sona to tell us about himself and how he became a Buddhist monk. So there is no need for me to give you a lot about his bio. However, I do want to say that having lived a monastic life for over 30 years, does give him a direct and in-depth understanding of the Buddhist teachings and, more importantly, of the practice of the spiritual tradition. Also, being a leading teacher in the West gives him a unique perspective on how to integrate these ancient teachings in today's world. Appropriately, we gave this presentation the title, American Buddhism, Reframing Eastern Principles for the Western World. I hope you enjoy this interview. Well, Ajahn Sona, thank you so much for making time for this interview. And I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to explore some aspects of Buddhism with you. However, just before we start on that, can you say a little about how and why you became interested in Buddhism and finally decided to become a Buddhist monk?
Yes, it's a question I've asked myself many times. It's a strange thing, somewhat strange to be a Theravada Buddhist monk in Canada, coming from a non-Buddhist family, a west coast of Canada, white, middle class, non-Buddhist, completely strange thing to want to become a Buddhist monk. And I have attempted to explain in public a number of times. The story must go back, must precede this life in some way, because even a strange kind of spontaneous interest in Buddhism as a world religion sort of popped into my mind when I was about 15, and I had very little knowledge of it, except that it was everything I ever heard about it was that it was peaceful. And at that time, the Vietnam War was raging, and I was quite opposed to it. I've always been tending to pacifism. And it all kind of collected in my mind. And then shortly after that, on a school trip, when I was just turned 16, I went to Japan with some of my fellow grade 10 class. It was quite a substantial trip. It was about 100 of us. And we spent about 3 or 4 weeks roaming around Japan. And of course, we went to some of the temples there. And we met a Japanese monk at Rionji, the famous temple with the exquisite gravel garden. And he bounded out from the back, very lively, smiling, mischievous, twinkles in his eyes and talked to us in a way somewhat cutting across the age thing. You know, when you're 16, you have a deep kind of, there's a conspiracy going on between you and adults. There's a conspiracy. You don't understand them and they don't understand you, but you pretend to try to behave yourself and so forth. Anyway, he seemed to have cut across that thing. And I remember that deeply. And then strangely enough, in the same summer, I randomly met a young man who was 26 at the time, who'd just been 7 years in a Trappist monastery, the most rigid or austere form of Catholic monasticism. And he was out for a period of time to review whether he would remain in the monastery. And he was called Brother Gary. And strangely enough, during his time in the Trappist monastery, he had been doing quite a bit of yoga. And I think he had been reading Thomas Merton and a few others who were quite sympathetic to and interested in Buddhism. And one day we sat down and he gave me an orange. He said, "Now, my name was Tom. Tom, when you eat that orange, pay attention to the feeling as it goes across your teeth and so forth. Be fully present to this experience. Be fully mindful of this experience." He never talked about where this came from. And he was very mindfully, 16-year-olds are usually savages when it comes to food. So it was quite a reversal to actually, taste your food rather than swallow just wolf it down. So these were strangely impactful. And never forgot these little brief encounters. And these were monks from two different traditions, although Gary was a little bit influenced by Eastern thought. I didn't know it at the time. So one thing led to another. And I went to university and studied philosophy as well, and hoping to find a meaning of life in there, and realizing, oh, no, it's not about the meaning of life. It's about the history of philosophy. So, I'm thankful that I was exposed to these ideas, but they certainly weren't adequate to make a life around. So I continued my search, and eventually I came across Buddhism, and I was intrigued. Now, there was a lot of Zen going around, but books on Zen and Tibetan. Virtually nothing on Theravada at that time. This is the early 70s. And so my encounters were with these Zen and Tibetan things. And eventually I was intrigued enough to discover that there was actually a Tibetan Lama in Toronto, where I was living at the time. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, a Tibetan Lama in Toronto? Where is this guy? And I'm going there the next time he has a little meeting. I'm there. So I was 23 or something like that. And I appeared, and then we began this process. He taught me breath meditation right off the bat, etc. So, and then I was intrigued also by Zen, and it turned out there was a Korean Zen center in Toronto as well, with a Korean monk. And I also went to there. I went to the Buddha's birthday celebrate, Vesak, a little poster on a telephone pole, Buddha's birthday, Zen center. I said, I didn't know there was a Zen center in Toronto. So I showed up for that, and I kind of preferred the atmosphere of the Zen tradition. And so I spent quite a bit of time with that, and still had not understood the nature of the Theravada flavors. And eventually I came across, at the Zen Center, I came across the Dhammapada and a few other formal suttas by the Buddha, and they impressed me greatly, the tone of that. So then it became a preoccupation, which actually just engaged me completely, so that my regular lay life, I was a musician and married. I was married to an opera singer, and I was a classical musician. So this ruined everything for me. It's much worse than having an affair. Meeting the Buddha is a good way to ruin your marriage. So I went off, and there were no real Theravada monasteries in North America at that time. So I went off and became a hermit. for several years, I lived as a hermit, following 8 precepts, in a bare shack with no distractions, very monastic. And then by chance, I got a connection. I was looking for a connection with the Theravada monasticism, and I heard about the first forest monastery in North America, the Bhavana Society of West Virginia. And I immediately wrote to them. And of course, that was before computers. And it was a 17-day round trip thing. You know, the letter, I had to then hitchhike to the nearest post office box, put it in, wait for weeks for it to return, and then hitchhike back, get the letter and say, yeah, sure, come on down. Where I immediately flew to West Virginia. And then I entered the monastery as a layperson and I was ordained there as the first ordination there. After that, I went to, having heard about Ajahn Chah, I was looking for high standards of Vinaya practice. And as you know, the monks in the modern world in Southeast Asia are of spectrum of consideration for Vinaya. There's a lot of cultural reasons for being a monk, and they often are not. They weren't living up to my sincere aspirations to do it the hard way. Now then, I heard about Ajahn Chah, and he seemed to be eagerly doing it the hard way, the hardest way I can imagine. This is strange too, because my generation, I'm a boomer, born in 1954, 67 years old now. The tendency of my generation was to run away from all of these rules and so forth, and to live freely, so-called freely. And I found it wanting to be so free. So I wasn't looking for freedom. I was looking for intense discipline and commitment and sincere conviction. And I was not interested in seeing what I could get away with. I was interested in seeing what I couldn't get away with. So that's a brief kind of summary of how I became a monk and my association with Buddhism.
Wonderful, very interesting. Now, during those years that you lived in the forest monasteries in Thailand, as you say, quite austere and not the easiest thing to do, can you tell us, what was it like and how that has informed your understanding of Buddhism and the way you teach?
Yes, I was very appreciative of it, and all of the demands and austerities. To have to get up at 3 a.m. every morning. And by the way, so as you recall, I was a musician before I was a monk. Now that musicians are notoriously anti getting up in the morning kind of thing. I had seen 3 a.m. Before, but never from the point of waking up then. You arrive at dawn having spent the whole night playing or something like this. I'd heard about 5 a.m., but I'd never actually been there. So I actually thought it would be good to go against my tendency, which is I really don't like to get up in the morning. And I systematically planned my life around not getting up in the morning. And now this started earlier, before I went to Thailand. I began to get up very early in the morning to go to the Zen monastery and so forth. And I wasn't tolerating my tendency to want to sleep in. So this was a very good challenge for me. It's the hard part of monasticism for me. The one meal now the insistence on one meal a day, very austere and precise insistence on one meal a day and everything in one bowl, no matter what it is. Just don't take the ice cream. If you can't put it in the bowl, don't take it. It's going to melt all over the fish. So that didn't bother me. I seemed to have the stomach of a goat, and a kind of disdain for too much fussing about food anyway. So I was all right. And not every monk there could tolerate that kind of diet because it's the northeast of Thailand, and it's famously Thailand is the mecca for great food. They have one of the greatest cuisines and cultures around food in the world, except for in the northeast of Thailand. It's impoverished, austere. It's very hard to compete with the austerity of the life of a local rice farmer. They sleep on the floor, they sit on the floor, they eat basically great lumps of sticky rice and a few little additions. They have a wooden pillow for their head. And how on earth are you going to live any more austerely than that? So you, as a monk in that area, you are expected to live this austere monastic life, but compared to the local farmers, it's quite hard to be an example. So these are the two elements: one meal a day of monotonous food that Westerners are not used to. It was fine with me. It was okay with me. I say I got good digestion, but many of the Western monks, the Germans and English and so forth, had great issues with indigestion and various problems with just too much sticky rice. But I was fortunate enough to be able to do it. But the early morning thing was a very trying, but because I knew it was my weak point, I actually used to volunteer to be the bell ringer. So not only do you get up at 3, but you have to get up before 3 in order to wake everybody else up at 3. So I would frequently volunteer, much to my second thoughts on the matter about 3 days into the bell ringer routine, but I always did that. And so, it's as austere as you can get. It is. I don't know any place on the planet really. The Catholic monastic structures, even the most austere of them, are really not any close to that. The standard Theravada practice is not close to that. That's as far as it goes. That's as far as it goes in terms of austerities and minimalism. And that's probably why we were all there. Strangely enough, we were the largest collection of Western monks on the planet in the Theravada world, trained through that system with Ajahn Chah's sort of attitudes. And we are certainly the dominant collection of monks, and we've persisted on and on and on. It keeps going. So at first, of course, there was no guarantee that any of this would persist. It was an experiment. I think a lot of people thought it was just a phase. And but here I am 33 years later at 67 years old. And there's a number of monks that are closing in on 50 years in the robes and so forth. And so somehow it is a viable way of being. And now it's quite important, I think, to a large body of people in the West and in Asia, because of these very things, this kind of interview on video, say a YouTube video, is reaching thousands of people now, or even tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Sometimes you see enormous reach. And this is very important that we do take what we learned, and which is so good. It was a balm for the Western psyche. So a lifesaver, really. And we, of course, we went through our own struggles and so forth. But when we come out the other side, we realize the benefits of this. We share it quite happily. I think it's good medicine for a large portion of the population, especially perhaps at this time. Yeah.
As you describe, certainly Buddhist monasticism in general, and certainly the stricter forest monastery tradition that you are in, is quite austere. But it seems that there are still many, many people who are drawn to it, even to this day, and are willing to undertake such a life of renunciation and apparent hardship. What draws a person today to become a monk?
I think the same thing that draws people to do ultra marathons. Or climb Everest. Actually, Everest is becoming passé. I think they have to climb 8 peaks barefoot in order to satisfy the human need for ultimate goals. And it's getting so that the planet we've already been to the poles. People are running around in shorts at the North Pole, etc. So we've exhausted the challenges on this planet even, and we're now headed for Mars and the rest of the universe. So that's this instinctive in humans to say, is there more to it? Is there something higher? Is there something farther? I don't feel complete. I don't think this is enough. I don't think it's enough. Is there anything more to it? And does anybody know what that is? So that's just human nature. It's not everybody's human nature. There's a whole collection of people who are, well, I wouldn't say that they're missing this aspiration, but they aspire to just the next fun, a bit of fun, the next hamburger or something like that. That's quite lofty for them. It is a shallow thing. And so a certain portion of the population realizes, okay, I've been there and done that. Is there anything more? So this is the portion of the population that becomes monks. They're asking, does anybody know anything for sure? Is there any real depth to anything? Is there more to it? Is there a part of my mind that I don't know about that could come into existence? And so this is what the drive is, I think, for Western monks. It is not necessarily the drive for Asian monks in general, but certainly a portion of them. Asian monks are quite have different motives. Sometimes, quite often, there's prestige to become a monk. There's cultural benefit, and education you can get, etc. It's a way of life, and they may, in fact, be in a certain Theravada cultures in the world do not actually have the aspiration for enlightenment in this life. It's a vague possibility somewhere, but it's culturally satisfying and respectable, and so they enter for that. But I think for the West, it's not particularly respectable. I think it's certainly when I was ordaining in North America, I remember this phrase that I had read by Thomas Merton, who had become a Trappist monk in the late 1930s, and he wrote his autobiography, said that in the 20th century, to become a monk in the 20th century is considered a scandal and an outrage. And more or less, it is a scandal. It is almost as if you've gone to the dark side or become a junkie or something, like incomprehensible. What would possess a man to do this? Whereas in Asia, of course, sadhu, that you have chosen this high life. And the lay people will say, I would love to do it, but I have too many attachments. Sorry. Good on you. In the West, what happened to you? Did your wife die, or what was the tragedy that caused you to do this thing? So this is the difference in attitude, but this allows, and this will, as things become more accepted in the West and monks have more prestige and so forth, I think there'll be a growing group that will ordain for the wrong reasons. They will ordain for perhaps an easier life and respect and things like this. But the first generation that does this is going against the grain and against the stream of society's values. And you get a lot of sincerity there and a lot of dedication. None of us wanted the easy way. We didn't go to the easy temples. We went to the difficult ones. Yeah.
You mentioned about how it's probably going to evolve and become even more common, if one can use such a word.
Yes.
Do you think that Buddhist monasticism in the West will continue to grow at the rate that it has, or faster over the coming decades?
I think we're on the verge of something, perhaps, and the reason why is just exactly what we're doing now. We're talking in a well-informed conversation, well-videoed with lighting and cameras and microphones, and presenting it in a vehicle that anybody can watch. And so it's no longer so obscure to actually have enough nerve as a Westerner to actually go and visit a monastery, a Buddhist monastery. Most people are too nervous to that. Now they can hear the talks, they can be exposed to things. So I can see a very rapid result of this. And this is the way things go. But before the medium of the internet, etc., just books, and fairly obscure books. Now, there was a certain portion of the generation that they were all reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And every backpack through Asia had the Siddhartha. It was all very nice, but they didn't really realize what monasticism is really like. So now there's a possibility. I don't think it'll ever be as numerous as the peak periods in Asia. Thailand, of course, is the central Theravada country in the world. It has 35,000 monasteries, and they swell to up to 300,000 monastics during the rainy season. It's an enormous thing. Burma is next in terms of numbers, but it's a bit of a dictatorship of, it's a politically very compromised, and the monks are trying to function in the midst of that. Sri Lanka is a smaller, but still very effective, 20,000 to 25,000 monks, perhaps. These are large numbers. It's certainly the largest monastic structure on the planet, and by far exceeding the numbers in the Catholic world. There is nothing like it. It has persisted for 2,500 years. Unfortunately, China, which had the largest population of something like a 250,000 monasteries, 250,000 monasteries before the Marxist Revolution, and millions of monastics, both nuns and monks as well. And so this was unfortunately wiped out by totalitarian governments and so forth. But I could see even that I can see that actually it's starting to resurface in China. The bleak. How many factory openings can you go to, and sing the national anthem and praise the chairman of the Marxist? It's not it doesn't do much for the human heart. And whereas Buddhism offers you a much higher possibilities, so they may be rediscovering this. It's very persistent. In the West, as I say, because of widespread the new access to monastics themselves, and this is very, very recent. I mean, I started to make a few of these videos a few years ago. Now I've made a couple of hundred. Or had it organized. It took all this equipment. I didn't understand any of this. So now, finally, we're getting to the point where we actually can produce a decent video that you can possibly listen to. So this is the way it's going. What the present monastic structure of our 35 branch monasteries in the West is basically, it's not growing much in numbers, but in experience. So there's quite a few abbots now that are pushing 50 years in the robes. Some of them beyond 50 years. Then there's a whole coterie of 40 plus, and then 30, and the kids are over 20 years in the robes now. They're Mahateras. And so you're seeing depth come in and experience come in, but not necessarily a popular spread of monasticism. This, in some ways, has to do with limited resources, yet we've spent the last 30 years becoming skilled electricians, plumbers, and carpenters. I really know the insides of how to make a building, how to run a building. Our monastery is off-grid as well. So I know all about, you want to know about solar panels? Talk to Ajahn Sona. You want to know about batteries? Oh, talk to Ajahn Sona. Diesel generators. Yes, I can tell you all about diesel generators. So we have displaced some of our, meditation time with these onerous tasks of actually building these monasteries with shoestring resources. Now the resources are becoming more stable, and we don't have to do the plumbing ourselves. Sometimes we can get a plumber in. I was crossing the border, the American border, from Canada to the US, and on the train, and the customs officers came on the train, and they walk down the aisle and ask for your passports, and then they occasionally question you. So they ask, "So what are you?" "I'm a Buddhist monk," says. So they try to make sure that you're not just an imposter, right? They don't know anything about Theravada monks, but so they asked me, "You're a monk, eh? So what's the next thing up from a monk? What's the next level up from a monk?" And I said, "A plumber is the next thing up from a monk. I just paid some guy $100 an hour to do our plumbing." That's normally the abbot has to do that, because who can afford $100 an hour? But he let me go, because and he laughed and laughed, because he also knows that the next thing up from a custom agent is a plumber. Almost everything is below a plumber.
I should think that for most of the monastics, though, including yourself, even though some of these mundane tasks have required some commitment and a lot of time and work in setting up a monastery, still the overriding aspiration, I would think, for every monastic would be, in Buddhist monastic anyway, this thing we call enlightenment. Would you say that is your ultimate goal that you're striving for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I make no bones about it, and I'm fairly radical about putting it in everybody's face. I don't hesitate to. It's not about a comfortable lifestyle or anything like that. It takes what you there's no compromise here. You're not in it as a social duty or anything else. It's I want authentic seekers. That's why I got into it, and I would not waste my time if it was not that. I kind of became a monk before I became a monk. I went off and lived in real austerity as a hermit, a lay hermit, for several years, and probably even more austere than the northeast of Thailand, especially in a Canadian winter in a broken down shack. So that's the only reason for me to want to devote so much of my life to this. And I have been rewarded for the endeavor. But it takes a lot of time to sort things out. Like, what is the Buddha saying? And what is being taught? Quite often you get variations of this with different teachers as well, and different types of attitudes. So I've had to just investigate the suttas deeply myself, and spend lots of time in the practice itself. And as I get clarity, then I can share it, But I'm even the lay people who are gathering around my monastery and around my videos and so forth, and my books. I'm keeping them with an aspiration to higher things. It's not a course at a university. It's meant for transformation. And I keep the idea of aspiration. As you probably know, I'm sure you know, that certain areas of the Theravada world think that the age of enlightenment has passed. This is the age of, like in the Catholic Church, the age of miracles has passed, or things like this. So the age of enlightenment in certain areas have thought to have passed. And in other areas, such as the forest tradition, it's a revival and a renewal and a reform movement, which has clear aspirations for enlightenment in this very life and a strong determination to do that, to move towards that. And this is, so there is a spectrum in the world of this. And I'm on this side of, there's no good reason to assume that you can't become enlightened. Why don't we assume that you can? And what do we got to lose? So strive, use up your life for that. It's a great use of life. It's fascinating, intense, rich, demanding, and riveting. So the best adventure you could go on. So why not?
Well, what is enlightenment, and how does one realize or reach it? Can you give us some insights into that?
Yes, I think that people should focus very much. Now, it's very easy to get interested in the technical language of the Buddha. He's a great philosopher and psychologist, and people can spend their lives just reading the suttas and the commentaries, and it's a great way to have a academic conversation. And it's also a lot of metaphysical talk about what is nibbana and what is, etc. But primarily, I would insist that the real mark of the Buddha's teaching is just in the first noble truth. Humans have an emotional problem. It's a shame to suffer unnecessarily. It's cruel and unnecessary in many cases. People have unskillful attitudes and are fed ideas that cause them distress throughout their whole life, such to the extent that they will actually kill themselves or bury themselves in anesthetics such as drugs and alcohol or distractions, etc. The Buddha is looking at this as a person who has come through that, has solved the issues which cause distress in a human. And he's come out the other side, and he just is sharing it. He doesn't have to share it. He is willing to share it out of compassion, that it doesn't have to be so hard, my friends. It really doesn't. It's not necessary to these tragic, self-destructive, harsh experiences are really not necessary. And so he makes a very beautiful and he's got a magnetic personality. If you accept the descriptions in the suttas, it's also about the voice that's talking to you and the way the person talks and the feeling that you get around them is the way that there's a persuasion. You don't have to suffer so much. Look at it this way. How would it be this way? So this is the essence. So suffering is the first noble truth, and then the end of suffering is all that at the end. Now, of course, then say it's been nice. Let's pull the switch on me to turn off the suffering. It appears in the time of the suttas that a few people could actually do that. Okay, stop suffering. Okay, click, done. Others, it's not so obvious, so they have to have a systematic explanatory method. How can I learn not to suffer like this? So that's the Eightfold Path, and the explanation of why do you suffer? But what is it that causes this suffering? What's going on inside there? And so this is the essence of it. It's how do you feel? And this is what avoids the plunge into the forest of views. Now, if you go into philosophy, there's just another forest of views about these things. And then there's the metaphysical challenges, what happens when you die, etc. The Buddha is a practical man. He's a pragmatic person. He says, set aside all of those distracting kind of speculations. You're never going to come to the end of these questions. How big is the universe? How old is it? Is it eternal? Is it not eternal? Is it infinite? Is it not infinite? What's the relationship between the body and the mind? What about the logical propositions that motion cannot exist? Or, we have all of these strange uses of our logical powers to end up confusing ourselves. So he says, look, I can't settle all of these arguments for you. I'm just telling you, you're not going to come to the end of them, and you're going to continue to suffer. So I'm just telling you right up front, there's only one thing I'm really interested in. How do you feel? And if you want to get on with this, because you can spend the rest of eternity calculating the number of atoms in the universe. Do you want to do that? Or do you want to unburden yourself from this suffering? Because I think it's much more important that you unburden yourself than you spend all your time speculating. So this is what he is. He's a very practical, good-hearted man, a true good human. And he knows what it is to be a human, and he knows what's important. And it's how do you feel? How's your heart? So when I teach, I try to make sure that people understand that. I'm not going to enter into endless debates with metaphysicians and philosophers and scientists about this and that. I'm asking the physicists, how you feel? How are you, buddy? I care about you, I don't want to talk about materialism and stuff. How do you feel? Because if you take up these ideas, you'll feel better. And that you will know for sure. You will know it directly. You're the only one that can know. How do you feel? And now I feel better. So that's what I'm offering. I'm not offering to win every debate with everybody, and I'm not willing to have a debate with everybody. I'm just telling you, you want the pill or you do not want the pill? Do you want the reduction of suffering? Or, okay, well, go ahead, suffer then, Too bad. Yeah, that's all.
Well, can you say more about the Eightfold Path that the Buddha said led to this enlightenment or end of suffering?
Yeah, the Eightfold Path is a marvelous structure. I've been at this for 40 years or more. And it's an organizational package, a teaching package in a time when there was no writing. It's a memory structure. It has basic features of a good outline for an essay. You get various topic headings, and then under each heading, you get subheadings to branch them out. And so it becomes this tree. And this is the way that seems to be the way the human mind works and remembers things. You have a basic tree, and then you add on branches and twigs and leaves, and then you can manage a very large structure of information because it's all properly schematically related in a systematic way. So this is what by the way, I have organized what are called upasaka programs. And that's just often by video and by forums and stuff. So it's an attempt to teach the basics of the Buddha's teaching over a period of a year with monthly assignments, study objects. So 3 or 4, like a reading of a sutta, a talk by me or another monastic, etc., and then questions and answers systematically. And the primary structure is the Eightfold Path. And it's, as traditionally, it's divided into sila, understanding the value of virtuous, upright actions and speech, and how that changes your life if you're committed to that. And the overlooked area, which is quite often overlooked in modern teachings of Buddhism and mindfulness and so forth, a deep serenity can, a taste of real lightness of being can be experienced in this life through this, what's called samadhi. Sila, samadhi, panya. Panya is wisdom, but not just information. It's not about being smart or intelligent. The intelligent person answers questions. And basically, if you want to get A's in school or university, you'll answer any question they propose to ask you, and you can waste your whole life answering questions because you're so smart, and you'll get quite rewarded. You'll get A's, which is a reward. Oh, wonderful! Of course, you'll end up $200,000 in debt as well. At the end, how smart were you actually? you paid them for you to answer questions. So the wise person decides what is the question is the most important question. I can't spend my life answering any question. I must decide which question is the one to spend my life on. And so this is the wisdom factor of the path, and that is like the direction to what is the problem of human existence, intrinsically the suffering problem, the existential weight and burden and maze and labyrinth that humans walk into. And that is the important question which we want to direct all my intelligence to solving. And so this is where people live. The Eightfold Path is where you live. And I keep reminding them that anytime it's not addressing the basic quality of the human heart, it's not what the Buddha found interesting. So when you search through the suttas for various descriptions of how old the earth is, or what kind of things they thought were under the ocean, and what was the cause of earthquakes and so forth, you are really wasting your time. The Eightfold Path is an address to the human heart. It is a systematic, beautifully laid out address, which you can remember, actually, if you learn it in a systematic way. It doesn't have to be in a book that you need the book to remember what it is. So you internalize this. Now, as a musician, the major form of music in the West is the major scale, and it has 8 notes in it. And you, as a musician, you're going to spend a lot of hours just going up and down those notes. And until you have fluency with those 8 notes, you're not going to make music. Before you make music, you have to make notes. And the notes are not the music, but at one point, the notes, the playing of mere notes, suddenly turn into music. And that's the moment of the path. The understanding of the Eightfold Path has now turned into the music of the Eightfold Path. And the music is undeniable. Nobody will have to tell you. You won't have to ask, am I having fun yet? And if you have to ask, you're not having fun. People would desperately like to be enlightened. It's nice to show up at a party and, be enlightened. It's very nice because you're better than them, right? And it's nice. Please don't sell yourself short. Please ask for more. Always ask for more. This is my basic advice, is that the Eightfold Path promises massive things. Don't let the Buddha off the hook. You keep saying to him, you promised like really good things. I'm not feeling the good things, the really good things yet. Is this just, did you sell me some poor goods? Question them. Ask for more. Ask for more. Ask for more. It's keep asking until you can't ask for more. That you are in a state of such well-being and stable ease, joy, and serenity that it's impossible to ask for more. And please go ask for more, and don't be shy. There's the buffet. Help yourself, and don't be shy. So this is the essence of this enlightenment thing. It's an emotional it's not about ideas. You're not smart. It's not being clever with the suttas or clever with ideas or anything. If you don't feel it, you're on the wrong track. It's like eating the menu in a restaurant. You go to the three-star Michelin restaurant and everybody's talking about it. You get the thing, you eat the menu, and you think it was like cardboard. It's not a menu. That's the Eightfold Path is the menu. It's not the food. Order the food, and if it doesn't taste like the best food you've ever eaten, you're at the wrong restaurant. So this is the kind of encouragement I give to people. Say, no, make this a human experience. Don't get sidetracked. With a little information, you can make some very beautiful music. You don't need a few notes. You don't need to have a PhD in this. You need a few notes, some beautiful folk songs. They're beautiful.
Now, can you say a little more about mindfulness? In the Eightfold Path, it does mention right mindfulness.
Yes.
And it is often very much emphasized in the West in particular. Can there be wrong mindfulness?
Indeed, there can be wrong mindfulness. And this is, I think we can trace some of this misdirection in some ways back to even to some Theravada sources in the attempt to define in the early days of especially Western monastics. And it goes back, Western monastics, at least in the modern times, go back to about 1900, 1890s sometimes. And these were Germans and British and so forth that discovered Buddhism and decided to investigate it. They attempted to write books or essays that would convey some of what they're learning about the nature of the mind and Buddhist teachings for a uninstructed audience, and especially perhaps a dismissive audience or a triumphalist audience, the Christian West and so forth. And they're trying to make this palatable without threatening them so that they can possibly investigate this. And they're tending to try to make mindfulness as the kind of entrance point. And they're emphasizing the mere paying attention. Now, paying attention is very valuable. Unfortunately, it's valuable for all kinds of things. It's valuable for nefarious evil deeds. To break into a house requires great attention. To shoot somebody from a distance of 150 yards is great intention. Great attention is required. Attention is useful for a full spectrum of both good and evil, and they kind of left it at that. Somehow that it's therapeutic or good for you to just pay attention, and that somehow just looking at what's going on in you is somehow going to solve your problems or dissolve your problems just by observing. And so when you read the Buddha, you can't take the seventh factor of the Eightfold Path out and remove it from the rest of the factors of the path. It is like taking a carburetor out of a car engine and using it as a paperweight. It does make an excellent paperweight. You can bang somebody over the head with it as well, but it is absolutely irrelevant to its function in an engine. Mindfulness, in the Buddhist mindfulness, right mindfulness is a part of an engine. And if you extract it and separate it, it simply loses its function. In order to understand right mindfulness, you have to look at the previous factor of the path called right effort. And in this, it is very clearly explained. There's two aspects that you're looking at. One of them is negative. What are the negative emotions? What are the problematic emotions? These are called the 5 hindrances in brief. And nicely, a handful. Notice the Buddha's elegance of teaching. He takes numbers like a handful, 5. Surely you can remember these things. And then he says, but what are the positive ones? And then he starts to develop a list of positive aspirations of emotions and lucidity of mind. And these are the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is the construct of the enlightened mind. He says, now, the 5, you have a duty towards the 5 hindrances. Those are negative. They are to be prevented if possible and removed if they do arise. And the other ones are positive, and they're to be cultivated, brought into existence. And when they are, don't let them go. Don't just watch them disappear. It's not about watching them. It's about sustaining them and deepening them and cultivating them. And the other ones, the negative ones, it's not about watching them. Of course, you have to identify them first. What's going on? Am I angry? Now you have some strategies and duties in order to remove those things, not to watch those things, but to remove those things. So this is where mindfulness in the West is often, because for sort of secular mindfulness things, quite often they don't like moral implications. I'm not here to be lectured about morality and stuff. It's your idea of what's good and your idea of what's bad, but I'm not here for that. I'm here hoping to get some, therapeutic benefit from mindfulness. Unfortunately, that's what we're offering. But it's entangled with understanding certain types of thinking and emotions are the problem. And they don't go away by looking at them. They go away by doing something about them. So the rest of the path is assisting in this. So that's the 7th factor of the path. And it's called right mindfulness. It's not called mindfulness. If you're teaching a course on mindfulness, it's not what we mean. When we're hopefully monastics and so forth, or those teaching Buddhist ideas of mindfulness, are teaching right mindfulness. And it's very clear in the titles. This is not just attention. It's a very specific type of attention, assisting other processes and factors. How will you know when you have succeeded with your mindfulness? Your right mindfulness? How will you know that? You will be on the edge of sama samadhi, right serenity and clarity. You will feel free from the harassments, the psychic irritants of the hindrances, and you will have been delivered into this beautiful state, emotional state. It's emotional state. It's not merely a mental state. Emotional clarity, joy is the predominant factor of the early experience of this samadhi, is joy. And you will have, I have succeeded with right mindfulness. It has delivered me to the shore of joy and ease of body, emotional joy. And people they're imagining it to be a very mystical experience, but the Buddha does use this word joy, and he uses the word sukha, or kind of bodily well-being and happiness, because, and you can learn something from this. Each feature of the path has 2 options. It's described as sama samadhi, which is right concentration or right serenity, and then miccha samadhi. So there's a kind of samadhi that's the wrong kind. why is it samadhi? Because it has joy and ease. It's the wrong, it's based on the wrong source. So you do have the jhana factors, the jhana feeling, the joy and the ease of body, but it's not that it's not morally bad. When we say miccha, wrong, it's not morally bad. It's just you played the wrong note on the piano. It's not a moral mistake. It's just, it's unfortunately, it has no profundity there. So the samadhi you experience you can experience from music, from art, from romance, from a good novel, from all kinds of experiences will give you joy and ease of body. But that's not the one we want. But it is those are the kind of feelings that, so that you know what we're talking about. When we talk about samadhi as having joy and pleasure of the body, you've had that. Now imagine if you could get that from another source, an internal source, a different source, that's all. And right mindfulness will deliver you to that. Wrong mindfulness can deliver you to wrong serenity, or I would say worldly serenity, types of beautiful experiences that are dependent on very worldly external sensory experiences. And mindfulness, attention to these things, wrong mindfulness will deliver you to that. So yes, attention, any kind of attention will get you quite often to joy and ease of body in the worldly sense, the sensuous sense, but that's not what we're talking about. So this is where a lot of clarity needs to be established. And quite often you'll find people somehow teaching it as if this is the Buddhist trick for why those guys are happy. It's just the mindfulness thing. No, it's not the mindfulness. You're better off, if you want that, don't go to a retreat or a mindfulness thing. Go to a spa or some place like that where they know about how worldly happiness happens. You'll get much better instruction. If you just want the little hit, the sensuous hit, and you want to enjoy it, go to the gourmet club, the wine tasters club, the concert, whatever. They know much more than we do about those things. We're talking about a different cause for this well-being. So we don't want to get those two things confused. And I think in modern times, with widespread mindfulness adoption, it is very confused. And quite often, even the people who are teaching it don't realize that's nothing to do with the Buddha's teaching. That's not what the Buddha is talking about. And you're perfectly welcome to use the word mindfulness and etc., but don't confuse it with, don't bring the Buddha in. It's really nothing to do with the Buddha. This is not the Buddha. What's the Buddha got to do with this? Yeah.
Now, you mentioned right concentration. I think you used the word serenity.
Yes.
To describe it. Now, some teachers say that this refers to extremely refined states of absorptions, or jhana, you've used that word as well, and say that these very high refined states are a prerequisite almost to some sort of insight to be experienced. What do you think about that point of view, and how do you teach and approach the development of right concentration?
Well, I actually talk about it. So that's the first step. There are two schools of Buddhism. Like, one is that there is this very strong, widespread kind of notion in the Theravada world, and perhaps in the Mahayana ideas as well, that samadhi, the eighth factor of the path is you might as well not talk about it, especially to lay people. Don't talk about it. You're wasting your breath. Talk about bringing food to the monastery and not getting drunk. Just a few moral, it's a waste of time for lay people and perhaps for monks to bother with this kind of thing. It's past, it's too hard. Come on. So all I can say is I don't think so. I think it is too hard for a lot of people, and that's fine. And they'll get other good teachings, but there's a lot of very bright and emotionally good-hearted people out there, out of a population of almost 8 billion people on the planet. Remember, at the time of the Buddha, in the 5th century BC, the population of the planet was probably 1/10 at best of what it is now. Now, with 10 times the number of people, you got 10 times the number of people with IQs over 150, actually. It's just human nature. There's lots of people with great potential in this life. They're very smart. They're quite capable of processing ideas. They have self-discipline. They're interested in these things. So there's bound to be lots of people. Out of that many people on the planet, there's going to be a substantial portion of the population who really want to explore this. And in some ways, some of them have a lot of time as well for this, and they can arrange pretty good situations. I quite often mention to people that the Buddha himself never taught a 10-day retreat. There are no retreats for lay people at all. There are urgings and instructions for lay people all the way up to full enlightenment. The Buddha is urging that you reflect on these things, that you cultivate these things. And then you go back to your farm with your 17 children and try to find some time to do this. But there are no accommodations in the monasteries for this. It's only a half a kilometer to the monastery, and you go back and forth and get further instructions. It's very peaceful, but there's no accommodation there. And if you come for an evening talk, there won't be a bed for you to spend the night on. You'll have to sit up all night. They don't want you, by the way, this 8 precepts where it's, you take this austerity for a day and a night, no evening meal and no luxurious beds or perfumes, etc. Part of that is just it's a very dangerous thing to walk home at midnight through the jungle in the 5th century BC with a dim coconut oil lantern, because there's man-eating tigers all over the place and giant snakes. So yes, you can come to the monastery, but we really don't, it's not a hotel. We don't have accommodation for you. So, but we can give you some very substantial instructions in this and suggest, like, who knows amongst this audience who has capacity for this. So the monks who dismiss this and don't want to teach this, I think, look, you don't know if some of these people that are interested, they might have these capacities. So I'm just going to put it out there. I don't know who does, and I can't even guess what portion of the population can do this and what can't do this. So the best strategy is simply, I'm going to try to offer instructions in this. And I'm not saying that nobody can get enlightened unless you go through all the 4 jhanas and you can do them backwards and forwards. Nah, because obviously in the time of the Buddha, you have people, first time they heard him, sitting in the audience, he's talking, they attain enlightenment. They had not practiced meditation before, and they attain enlightenment. I don't know what's going on, but it looks like they were absorbed in his talk. And this is what we call, you'll see this in music or in somebody reciting a poem or watching a movie or something like this. You will see the audience, some of the people in the audience can be absolutely absorbed into it. They're not aware of anything else going on. You could stick a pin in them and they wouldn't notice it. That is samadhi connected with that's the first jhana. It's a focused attention on a concept, a concept that you're internalizing and fully absorbed in. And some people attain enlightenment like that. But to want to dismiss all of the work of samadhi and stuff, then because I just rather just go to a talk and get enlightened, like, well, I don't have time for this, just I'm enlightened, one talk, that's my cup of tea. Come on, that's for special people. Yes. And they explain this usually by saying that in the 5th century BC, around the Buddha, there was a lot of people reborn with high dispositions to this. So, okay, I'm fine with that conversation, whatever. But I would suggest that it's a rare thing, and that there's no harm in developing the beauty of samadhi, and that it is in fact praised again and again by the Buddha. If you can do it, please do. It is free from danger. It is harmless. So it should never be described as a distraction or a yogic idea or something like that. It's the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path. It's super normal. It's not what normal people do, but that should not be that. It's not super normal, like only one person in the world has ever done this or something. It's not that. It's just there's lots of above normal activities that a substantial portion of the population can do, and it's not normal, but it's possible. So I make it available. I don't give out the magic, I had jhana, apparently I got a certificate, and I don't make it impossible either. It's not only 3 people on the planet now alive can ever do this, so you better not waste your time. It's just beyond you. No, it's not that. And it's not like everybody, this is a 4-day retreat. You'll all walk out having had the 4th jhana. Good on you. You are now super normal. This is delusional selling of things, and then delusional protecting of things or removing of things. There's somewhere in the middle is the truth about these things. And I tell many stories about the Buddha himself finally being a good-hearted human to himself. The night of his enlightenment, he's been out with the wrong crowd, torturing the hell out of himself. And finally, as a good man, says, enough of this. It goes nowhere. It's a terrible thing to torture yourself. It's not sane. He gives it up. Now what? Goes, sits under a nice tree by a river, beautiful breeze blowing across his face, and he remembers his childhood. He's 7 years old, 8 years old, maybe 5. And he's surrounded by some very nice women. His aunt and his nanny and maybe some sisters and stuff. And he's having a good time. He's it reminds him of being under that tree. He's now stopped the torture. He's accepted his good human heart. He has decided to eat. And right at that time, he's experiencing the wind from the river across his cheek, and he's feeling the breath coming in and out of his nose as he did as a child. Under this beautiful tree at a spring plowing festival, where he says, I went into jhana as a child. I felt joy, ease. It was beautiful. Why don't I do that again? There's nothing to be feared in this. And so that samadhi, the last factor, the right samadhi, the last factor of the path, is what preceded his awakening. It's a clear story. It's not some wacky yogic thing. It's right from the mouth of the Buddha. He's just breathing gently as he did as a child, having given up vicious practices of self-torment, and become taken care of his body, fed it, got it out of the sun. And now he's not doing inhuman things anymore. He's doing human things. But he doesn't want to go back to the cheap thrills of the palace either. He's too sophisticated a person. It's not good enough. There must be something more to life than dancing girls and really good rice. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. And then now he goes into the above normal part of the human mind and the emotional structure, and there he finds the answers. He is clarified that it's not necessary to suffer like that, that there is a beautiful alternative. And this is what he finds out, is that there's a beautiful, sustainable, continuous state of well-being. The mind awakens to this. It opens like the lotus. When the light comes on it, it opens to this. And it's an inherent part of the mind. It's the luminous aspect to the mind is available. But when it's not being harassed. So that the mind, the ordinary person, harasses themselves all day long and into their dreams even. If you just stop that, you will find that the mind is like a child that's being shouted at and hit. Then somebody comes into the room who embraces the child, says, "You're safe with me. I won't hurt you. I won't harass you." And then the child feels the joy returns. They're safe. It doesn't matter if it's a puppy, a cat. Universally, the mind is oppressed by harassments and returns to a sense of joy and playfulness and well-being and lack of fear when it's not being persecuted. And so that's what he's saying. So stop this harassment and persecution of yourself. And he's saying, look, there's all kinds of religious ideas out there that are terrible for humans. They're destructive harassments. None of them are beneficial. They're terrible. Like stop this persecution, and then you can trust that your mind will respond. It's deep within you that it feels safe and it's not going to be harassed anymore. This is the night of the awakening. This is the role of samadhi, and the taste of the samadhi is very similar to the taste of this enlightenment. So he talks about it as temporary nibbana. That samadhi is temporary nibbana. But we have to redefine it as not some grim laser beam that shoots out of your head and burns through steel. It's a terrible way to give, it's a beautiful way to give yourself a headache. It's a wrong thing to do. No. This has got to be a beautiful experience. And it seems to be available to children sometimes, when they're in a very safe and loving situation. So this is what we're talking about here. So in order to talk about this, we have to give many similes and things, and I borrow them from the Buddha himself because the language is much better expressed in these pictures he gives us, similes of what it's similar to this and it's similar to that. That's how you get to it. Oh, I get it. I know what that is. So it's like that. Yeah.
Well, just shifting gears, because we are coming close to the end of our interview, I would like to get your view on the current situation in America, and I assume Canada is much the same, and the various challenges we face with the very, very polarized situation in society. What guidance can Buddhism offer that you would like to mention?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of defensive. The best thinking we ever do is when we're in a mood of goodwill. And so before we think about anything, we have to ask ourselves, like, is this the idiot in me that's thinking about it? Is this the angry person who's thinking about it? Or is this the kindly mother or father trying to solve a problem with their kids because they care about them? They care about themselves and they care about others. And if you're approaching these things from that point of not outrage or anger, then you're likely to come up with the best kind of speech that you can. So this is the kind of the advice is that don't prepare the words, prepare the emotion, and the right words will follow. But if you prepare the words, it just means that the words are being filtered by the emotion that you have. So there's a saying, speak in anger and you will make the best speech you ever regretted. This is also the young man going to a date with the young lady, and he is imagining all the first date, and he's going to knock on the door. Their parents are going to be there and everything. And he's got this dialogue in his mind. He's got this monologue. He's going to say this and he's going to say that and everything. And he's preparing himself. And then he shows up, knocks on the door, and a dad answers the door. And he says something unexpected, and the whole dialogue, everything he rehearsed is totally inappropriate to the situation. It just goes out the window. He doesn't know what to say anymore. So he did the wrong thing. He rehearsed the words. But you don't rehearse the words, you rehearse the attitude. And if you don't have the an attitude of goodwill, or at least equanimity, then you're probably going to say the wrong thing and think the wrong thing as well. And you can know in your own personal experience how many times you thought, geez, I don't know what I was on about there. That could have been done more skillfully for sure. But I was mad. I was being, firm. But then you think, geez, I shouldn't have said that, really. So that's the thing. I mean, I don't know whether people can hear the message. I give the message regularly. It's like how to find your way through this. And it's not that everybody will respond to it, but usually people do respond to a feeling that the tone is, you're not trying to defeat them, humiliate them or something like that. You're actually understand that when you're angry, you say things and do things, and you may distort ideas as well. So goodwill is the beginning of it. And it doesn't mean that you tolerate injustices or don't say anything. You summarize it as.
But in ending,
yes,
can you share just, if you had one other Buddhist teaching that you would want to share with humanity today? I mean, you've mentioned already quite sufficient, but is there anything else just in ending that you would like to